fierce criticism from officials.
And then you got a bunch of yahoos again that number one, hold the party. Like, man, come on. Like, what don't you get?
4 people were shot at one of the parties. Meanwhile, the party organizers are facing steep fines of up to $100,000 plus.
We cannot take this lightly, and we must not let our guard down.
The city is reporting its lowest case count of COVID-19 since March, but officials are warning that COVID fatigue could take us back to square one. And 3 women are doing what they can to commemorate all Canadians who've died from COVID-19, patch by patch. Good evening, I'm Marivel Tarouk. A shooting at a massive house party in Brampton has left 4 people injured and others wondering why hundreds of people were gathered at the home in the first place. It happened in a house that was rented for the weekend through Airbnb. Residents saying there were huge parties all weekend that ignored COVID-19 bylaws, and police were called to the home many times before the shooting even happened. Greg Ross has more.
Just before 6 o'clock this morning, gunshots rang through this residential neighborhood in Brampton filled with multi-million-dollar homes. This man had just woken up when he heard the shots just steps from his front porch.
As soon as I step on the porch, water the plant, I hear the shooting, at least 2 or 3.
He says within seconds, 2 cars sped past his house.
That was very fast. And then I saw all of the police cars come in on both sides.
Police say the shooting happened at this house, and there were multiple people injured.
Officers did find 4 people who had suffered from gunshot wounds.
A man and a woman were taken to a trauma center with non-life-threatening injuries. 2 other men were taken to a local hospital with minor injuries. One resident who didn't want to be identified told CBC News one of the victims was hiding in her backyard.
There was someone banging on our back porch this morning. My son saw a woman who was, signaling to call the police.
Right.
And there was a body in our backyard, an injured body.
Today, this car with what appeared to be a bullet hole and a flat tire remained parked in the driveway of the house where the shooting happened. One of the owners of this house confirmed to CBC News that they had rented it out for the weekend on Airbnb. And while the rental agreement was for 8 people, neighbors say there were more than 100 here at a party on Saturday night.
The noise was so loud, you could hear it all around the area, okay? So I went there and I said, can you please put it lower? Yeah, but nobody budged. So we called the police.
This was not the only party in Brampton police were called to on Saturday night. There were around 200 people at this party near Countryside Drive and Goreway Road. The partiers ignoring the current restrictions against large gatherings because of COVID-19, something Premier Doug Ford voiced his frustration about today.
You think the cheese slipped off the cracker with these people? Like, they just don't get it. Like, come on. We're all in this together.
Both the Premier and the Mayor are calling on those responsible for these parties to be fined the maximum of $100,000 for hosting large gatherings. Residents in this neighborhood say they would also like to see the owner of this property punished for allowing this to happen.
I've been here 35 years. We invested all our money in this area, and now we have this. Somebody wants to make a big buck. He doesn't even live, they don't even live here.
Police say they are still searching for the suspects in this shooting this morning. Greg Ross, CBC News, Brampton.
The province continues to see COVID-19 numbers trend downwards. Ontario reported an additional 119 cases of COVID-19 today. The health minister says of those cases, 76 were diagnosed in people aged 20 to 39. The province is reporting 1 new coronavirus death today. A CBC News count of the overall number of deaths in Ontario stands at 2,792. Meanwhile, in Toronto, only 5 new cases of COVID-19 were reported today. That is the lowest number we've seen since March. But as Katerina Georgieva reports, our city's medical officer of health warns we need to keep our guard up.
I have heard many people speak of COVID fatigue, and I hear that some believe that the pandemic is over.
A warning, despite a downward trend, COVID-19 is not gone from this city, and a message to young people in particular that they're not immune.
I'm concerned as I continue to hear that some younger people believe that they are not at risk of catching COVID-19 and that they'll not experience severe illness if they do get infected.
Several leaders have pointed to young people for making up a chunk of most recent cases. This clinical psychologist says we can't lump all young people into one group, adding that COVID fatigue means different things to different people.
For some people, COVID fatigue might also mean that they feel too self-isolated and they miss sometimes some of the fun gatherings that they had. For others, COVID-19 might be something different. It just means that, I just want to go outside and not to be worried about what I'm touching or who I'm hugging.
Some say they're definitely feeling it.
Absolutely fatigued of COVID.
I don't know if it's localized to a particular age demographic, actually. I think everyone has been locked up inside for months now. Everyone's looking to socialize.
But some remain concerned.
At least in my house, because I live with a couple of people, like there's, we were more strict about it before, and sometimes I feel afraid that we should be more strict about it now, because it feels like in some ways we're loosening up on it just because I think people just want to do things.
There's still a lot of ways we can have fun and do the hangouts, just socially distanced, of course, but there's a certain amount of people who have given up on it, yeah.
As for whether the latest low numbers could spark a spike,
I don't think also a lot of people necessarily always watch the numbers to always know, predict what they want to do. Certainly, there is always a risk that people might further reduce or underestimate the risk involved. Nevertheless, regardless of the numbers, there's still a pandemic.
Davila says everyone must remain vigilant. And while there's no way to predict when exactly a second wave might come, her team is already actively preparing for that moment when it comes. Katerina Georgieva, CBC News, Toronto.
The government is stepping in with $4 billion to help municipalities across Ontario recover from COVID-19. Just how much Toronto will get isn't clear yet, but we know the pandemic has left the city more than $1 billion in the red. Lorenda Redekop has details now on where some of the aid money will be going.
A relief for towns and cities across the province that have warned of budget shortfalls. Today, $4 billion to help them.
That's $4 billion to support homeless shelters, women's shelters, food banks, public health, and transit.
Half the money will go towards transit. The federal and provincial governments are splitting the cost, filling the gap after a huge drop in ridership since the pandemic hit. A big chunk of this funding is coming from the federal government and its Safe Restart Agreement. It gave $7 billion to Ontario.
I fought for transit. I fought for municipalities, and in a show of unity, the federal government stepped up to the plate.
This is a very positive sign.
Toronto's mayor says he's still waiting for details. He and other big city mayors met online earlier today. John Tory had been warning about a budget deficit of $1.35 billion for this year, saying cuts to the TTC might be inevitable. But the city may have to cut homelessness and shelter services and increase taxes.
I'm hopeful that we can get the entire $1.3 billion, but I can't say I'm expecting it in the sense that I know that out of a total of $4 billion, they will have to allocate this as between transit and other municipal uses. I'm aware of the fact there are 440 cities and towns.
It's yet again revealing the broad responsibilities cities have.
From water and sewers to sidewalks to parks to transit to roads, to garbage collection, the list goes on, and they have very few revenue sources.
They're not allowed to carry a deficit and can only bring in money with property taxes or user fees.
Perhaps down the road, we should be thinking about who does what. What are the provincial responsibilities? What are municipal responsibilities? What are the right revenues to pay for those responsibilities?
This funding is set to tide cities over for the next 6 to 8 months, but it's unknown what will happen if the pandemic lasts beyond that. Lorenda Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
Coming up in a few minutes, we'll look at a spike in bike thefts during the pandemic and what advice police have for bike owners. A huge fire in Stony Creek near Hamilton has destroyed 11 homes.
The fire started around 2:30 in the morning. 2:30 in the morning, I heard some big noise. I go out, and my barbecue patio started, fire.
Now, from the back, it looks like a war zone. Scorched patio sets and hot tubs. The roofs and upper floors collapsed. Officials say the fire started in the end unit and spread. 11 townhomes in total were gutted. 20 other homes have been evacuated. Thankfully, no one was injured. Now, investigators will look into what started the fire and if the fire break in the building was to code.
Thankfully, we have other structures here that we are going to take a look at. They are what we call an exemplar. And we'll be checking to see how they were completed, whether or not they had the appropriate fire block, fire partitions.
All evacuees have been taken to a nearby hotel. And a woman is dead after a fire engulfed a home in Brampton this morning.
At first, I just saw the smoke coming out the house, so I just thought, okay, I was like, oh, there's something's burning, but then after I looked outside and I go to the side of the house and I see the doors on fire and everything, so clearly the whole entire house is on fire now. So then that's when I called 911. I've never seen a house burn down like that.
It happened at this single-story home near Nanwood Drive in Cornwall Heights. Firefighters pulled a woman from the house. Paramedics transported her to Brampton Civic Hospital, but she did not survive. Residents of the Jane and Finch area came together in protest today, calling on Metrolinx to keep its promise to donate a parcel of land for a community hub.
And to see institutions, governments, and corporations try to take our spaces and co-op. Shame. We will fight back.
The land is near York Gate Boulevard and Finch Avenue West, owned by Metrolinx as it builds the Finch West LRT. The plans for the neighborhood space were thrown into limbo last week after Metrolinx said it was required to sell it at market value. A councillor for the area says as recently as a few months ago, Metrolinx indicated the hub would be built here and was blindsided by the news. The CEO of Metrolinx continues to insist the hub will be built and is exploring options for what else can be built on the space too. People in the area say they are cautiously optimistic but want more specifics. Still ahead tonight, why 3 women are making it their mission to commemorate every Canadian life taken by COVID-19, patch by patch. That story coming up. Plus, Colette joins us after the break with a look at your forecast. Colette.
Are you ready to leave some of the humidity and active weather behind? I'm meteorologist Colette Kennedy. We're going to do that, clearing out overnight tonight and then more comfortable weather moving in. I'll have the complete forecast coming up after the break.
The NHL bubble kicked off on a bright note today. The league announced no new COVID-19 cases after testing more than 800 players last week. Eastern Conference teams are now in Toronto, some staying at the Royal York Hotel, others at Hotel X. Here's what two of the Leaf stars have to say about the bubble experience.
It's obviously a little weird, but we're just trying to get quickly used to being uncomfortable. I think that's kind of the key here for us, is just being comfortable with the uncomfortable. It's going to take some time, we know that, but obviously it is a little weird being home, but being in a hotel instead of your house.
Yeah, I mean, we got in late last night, so pretty much just kind of got settled in, unpacked, and then went to bed. And then obviously today practice. So, the next couple of days are going to be a bit of an adjustment, but it's nice to have everybody together, and I think it'll be a good bonding experience.
The Leafs play their first exhibition game tomorrow night against the Montreal Canadiens. Playoff qualifiers begin on Saturday. Well, the pandemic has seen a surge in people hitting the road on two wheels. Unfortunately, it also seems to be leading to a spike in bicycle theft. Tonight, we have video of one of those incidents. And Natalie Nanowski has some tips on how to keep your wheels from becoming a target.
Watch this guy closely. He's about to steal a bike. He looks around, pulls bolt cutters from his bag, cuts the lock.
And then he goes on, he gets on one of the bikes, rides off with the bike.
That was Simon Hooper's bike, stolen Friday night from this post near Queen and Dufferin over the weekend.
So we drove around the area, we checked all the usual spots, nothing like that. Then we were actually able to get the security footage from just up here, which is very, very clear.
He's not the only one whose bike was recently stolen. Just down the street, Haley Requena Silva woke up to his bike gone from outside of his building.
I went to the concierge and I asked if there was if I could see any footage, and he was like, all right. He's like, where is it? And then I showed him where it was, and they're like, oh, camera can't see that.
A CBC employee also had her bike stolen in the same area. It ended up on Kijiji in Mississauga, where Peel Police got it back for her in a matter of days.
We asked Toronto Police if there's been a spike in bike thefts since the COVID-19 pandemic. They told us we can't get those numbers without a Freedom of Information request, which could take months. So instead, we looked online at a lot of the cycling sites in the city, and there we found that a lot of people are posting that their bikes were stolen.
And on Kijiji, dozens of missing ads posted in the last few days. And if you want to replace your bike, you could be out of luck. Many places are still sold out. There are ways to protect yourself. Get a strong lock and register your bike's serial number.
And if you are a victim of a bike theft, please do report it to police, because most of the time we do actually identify or find these bikes, but we don't have the owners for it.
I've also been to all the local bike shops as well, and pretty much just given a photo of it and say, hey, this is the deal, this is the reward that's on as well. If someone comes in, can you contact me?
So he's pretty hopeful he'll have his bike back before the end of the summer. Natalie Nanowski, CBC News, Toronto.
Time for a check on the forecast with meteorologist Colette Kennedy. Colette, ominous clouds producing some rain for us this evening.
Thanks, Marivelle. Well, boy, oh boy, we've got all the ingredients here. Of course, we've had the high temperatures, but also the humidity, so very buoyant air. And then when you bring a cold front in, basically that's kind of the trigger, the lifting mechanism to bring us in some thunderstorms and some of these downpours here to kind of wring some of that moisture out of the atmosphere. Earlier in the day, really isolated downpours, and then getting a bit more organized as we got into the evening hours and kind of on the tail end of that now. So we will see things calming down as we get into the overnight hours, almost there, but we got to get after midnight, and then really things will start to clear out. As we get into Tuesday and Wednesday, then it won't be nearly as humid, so it's going to be more comfortable, but still some isolated showers. I've at least got a chance for that into both days, especially I'd say Wednesday, and into the holiday weekend, mild, and I mean that in a good way. So temperatures kind of close to seasonal, comfortable, humidity not too bad. Some conditions I think most people are going to enjoy, but hey, daytime highs today. Yes, into the 30s. And today, the 15th day for this month where we had a temperature of 30 degrees or warmer. Earlier in the month, we had that stretch of 9 days in a row, in fact. But really, it was the dew points. We had dew points in the 20s, even up towards the mid-20s for Toronto. Pretty extreme in terms of the moisture content. And then our humidex values going up towards 40, even into the low 40s. So that's why just feeling so extreme with our heat warning. We'll see that dropping, but still having to deal with some of that thunderstorm activity, pushing that away as the cold front goes through, and then drying things, not only drying things, but clearing things out. Clearer skies to start the day off tomorrow, but then into the afternoon, a little more cloud cover, and you can see a few spotty, just some isolated showers likely to pop up. Not too much to that. It's Wednesday morning where we have a greater chance to get into a few little downpours very early in the morning, and then a return into the afternoon of some isolated showers. In between, though, and in most cases, much of the day, Tuesday certainly, and much of the day Wednesday is still going to be quite a nice day. So we've got a nice week really coming towards us. Things looking pretty good. Overnight tonight looking pretty good once we clear things out overnight, and low around 17 degrees. High tomorrow 29 to 30 degrees, but way more comfortable. The humidex value Windsor 32, maybe 33. Similar for the GTA. After these overnight lows, we're going to find those temperatures tomorrow close to seasonal, but just not so much humidity. So you're going to enjoy that. Wednesday, temperature comes down a little bit and really comfortable as we get towards the end of the week and we're headed into that holiday weekend.
Another holiday. All right. Thanks, Colette.
The weather is brought to you by Trane, the most reliable heating and cooling brand. We test, so it runs. It's hard to stop a train.
3 women from a wool shop in Lindsay, Ontario have begun a massive endeavour to commemorate all the Canadians who've died from COVID-19. Patch by patch, they're knitting together a blanket with each square representing a life lost to the virus. As Kelda Yoon explains, they hope it will serve as a lasting monument to the thousands of Canadians behind the stats.
So this one was knitted by a lady named Ruth.
Heather Bredner says the squares have already started arriving.
This one our friend Deb brought in.
It was just about a week ago she and her 2 co-workers, Amanda Sharp and Allison Day, launched their idea to create the COVID-19 memorial blanket.
People were becoming just numbers. People were becoming statistics. And those faces and those beautiful souls have all... It felt like it was being lost.
Across Canada, close to 9,000 people so far have died from the virus.
What we really hope is that it brings a little bit of solace to the families who have lost a loved one to know that their memories aren't being forgotten.
The women are calling on knitters across the country to help. So far, about 400 have registered on their website, volunteering to knit 12 by 12-inch squares, which they then mail in. Meanwhile, families who have lost someone can register their loved one's details online. A placard with their name and province will then be placed on a square.
It's 9,000 square feet and will weigh 1,500 pounds when it's complete.
Bredner says she drew inspiration from the massive AIDS memorial quilt.
It's the most incredible experience. You walk into a room and literally before your eyes are 2,000 or 3,000 lives. You cannot leave without feeling some kind of emotion and understanding for what people are up against.
That was such an impactful thing to me the first time I ever saw that.
She hopes the blanket will have the same impact.
We needed a visual to represent the gravity and the sheer physical heaviness that the country feels during this pandemic.
The group is also putting together a memorial book. The intention is for the blanket and book to tour the country before being put on permanent display. Kelda Yoon, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, in a reversal of traditional roles, a mountain rescue team was called in to extricate a St. Bernard from the highest peak in England. Daisy ran into difficulty on the descent from the summit on Friday. Her owner said her back legs seized and she refused to move. So the rescue squad swooped in, strapped her to a stretcher, and headed down. Following her rescue, Daisy spent the night in a deep sleep, reportedly snoring a little louder than usual. Good girl. That's our show for you tonight. Thank you for watching. Good night, everyone.